Former lawmaker Zaldy Co alleges President Ferdinand Marcos ordered 100 billion pesos insertion in the 2025 national budget. In his latest video statement, Co accuses PBBM and former House Speaker Martin Romualdez of receiving 56 billion pesos in kickbacks from the flood control projects in Bulacan province alone. But Marcos refuses to dignify the allegations with a response. Good morning. I'm Attorney Jimeno. This is At the Forefront. Public anger rages as authorities have yet to hold accountable those behind the flood control scandal. The Iglesia ni Cristo's anti-corruption rally is now on its second day. More rallies are expected to be held next weekend. With the latest revelations made by Zaldy Co implicating President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., will these trigger his removal from office? We'll tackle these questions and more with Attorney Salvador Panelo. He's a former Chief Presidential Legal Counsel of the Duterte administration. Good morning, Attorney Panelo.
Good morning, Karen.
Attorney Sal, let's start. In your column today, you said that President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. cannot escape liability. Can you elaborate?
Well, definitely, because as I've repeatedly said, he prepares the budget through the Department of Budgets and Management. So he knows exactly where the allocations would be brought to. And after that, the budget goes to Congress and his allies do the insertions there, the whatever irregular things they do. So when it goes back to him after Congress pass it as a bill, then he should know exactly what happened to the original budget.
So you're saying more of command responsibility?
Definitely.
Na kahit wala siyang alam, yung mga under him, if they passed a budget that has irregularities at pinirmahan niya ito, then based on that principle,
yes,
he's liable. What about...
As Trump said, the buck stops here. He is accountable to the failures and success of whatever his cabinet or he does.
Mm-hmm. Well, you also said in a statement last Friday
Yes.
that it appears now from the confession of Zaldy Co that he, you meant President Bongbong Marcos, is irreversibly being pointed to as the brains behind the insertions.
Yeah.
Martin Romualdez and Zaldy Co complied with his instructions. So,
Yeah.
are the statements, yung revelations ni Zaldy Co, enough to point to the president?
No.
Okay.
Because as a lawyer, as we know, he has to provide documentary evidence as well as testimonial evidence to validate his confession. But the confession itself is proof that there is something irregular and illegal in what he did. You must remember that this is a declaration against interest. He confessed to doing something irregular. Mm-hmm. So,
which is being either a co-principal or an accomplice, kung totoo man na talagang si Zaldy Co yung nagbigay ng
in
pera.
other words, you're gonna be saying na wala yan. Anong wala yan? Umamin na nga siya na may ginawa siyang krimen eh.
You're talking about Zaldy Co na umamin siya na
kung umamin ka ng krimen, so kapanipaniwala ka because matidemanda ka. Ba't ka aamin?
Pero hindi siya under oath. So, walang sworn statement. What do you say about yung mga sinasabi nila, former Speaker Martin Romualdez and even the chairman of the Blue Ribbon Committee, Senator Ping Lacson, that yung statements ni Zaldy Co do not hold water in court because these were not made under oath?
For now. But siyempre dahil sinabi niya, sigurado, ilalabas niya. May abogado naman siya. Mm-hmm. I'm sure he will be executing a sworn statement.
What about statements made by former Budget Secretary Butch Abad and also Navopta's representative Congressman Toby Tiangco that why would the president order insertions at the bicameral conference committee when he could have made these as items in the budget doon pa lang sa pag-prepare ng yung NEP, di ba? Yung...
Simple. The answer there is to provide him with deniability.
So hindi niya isasama, pero ipapa-insert niya na lang
Alam mo,
sa iba.
The problem with these people, they are underestimating this president. They tell us he's weak. I disagree. He has political will. He was able to do that in the KOJC. Can you imagine sending their 3,500 policemen just to arrest Kibuloy? He was able to arrest, detain, and through to The Hague, Mr. Duterte, the former president. And he was able to humiliate General Torre, who followed strictly his instructions. Pag ganyan ang klaseng tao, may political will, magaling siya.
So there's more than meets the eye.
Underneath the innocence, the party boy image, delikado ka.
What about yung defense ng iba katulad ni DPWH Secretary Vince Dizon na sinasabi niya paano magiging guilty yung presidente when siya nga yung nag-expose nito itong flood control scandal?
Exactly.
Starting with his statement sa SONA na mahiya naman kayo.
If you were the culprit, yun ang gagawin mo. Kasi, yun na nga, yun yung defense mo na, paano siya magiging part yan? Siya nga nag-expose. Kaya nga in-expose para hindi siya mapagdudahan, nakasama siya. Pero ako, I will limit myself to the command responsibility thing. He cannot really escape that. Kasi, alam mo kung anong ginawa sa budget mo Kaya dapat binito mo na yun. But what he did, he vetoed one item or two items, which is minuscule. Napakalit nun Can you imagine, trillion yun pagkatapos tatanggalan mo lang ng ilang daang milyon.
So in the first place, yung pagpirma niya under the principle of command responsibility, that
In other
can lead
words,
to accountability.
Karen, as president, you open the floodgates of corruption. Without signing that bill into law, wala sanang ganyan.
Well, you also mentioned in your statement last Friday that PBBM's action is a betrayal of public trust, which is an impeachable ground in the Constitution. So do you think there's grounds for an impeachment?
Of course, certainly there is. But whether or not this will push through in Congress, I don't think so because his allies are there.
Yeah. So you think in terms of legally, there can be grounds for impeachment, but whether this is something that could possibly happen, malabo.
Malabo yun.
But merong mga nagsispekulate na parang yung paglabas naman ni Zaldy Co is part of a design or a planned, orchestrated. It was leading up to the rallies of the Iglesia ni Cristo this weekend. Meron bang prior coordination between Zaldy Co and any of the Duterte camp?
I do not think so. But we must always remember that his confession, regardless of whether this isn't yet validated by documentary and testimonial evidence, is a declaration against himself.
Yeah, which under our rules of evidence
He
is,
opens himself to
yeah.
criminal prosecution. Yan ang nakakalimutan ng lahat ng mga critics.
Well, ngayon sinasabi rin nila Ombudsman Boying Rimulyan that bumalik na lang siya dito at yung mga sinasabi niya na accusations ay ilagay niya sa sworn statement. But Zaldy Co says that siya naman, pagka meron siyang mga revelations, sinasabi niya na may isang sinabi niya na sana hindi pa ako mabaril bago matapos ito. Do you believe that he really has threats to his life?
I think so. If you're pointing to the President of the Philippines and the former Speaker of the House as the brains behind all these anomalies, matatakot ka nga.
Si Guteza, sa statement ni Zaldy Co, he corroborated what Guteza said dun sa Blue Ribbon hearing in terms of delivering cash, luggages of cash to Speaker Martin Romualdez and to Malacanang. Pero hindi natin makita si Guteza. Would you know what happened to Guteza? Is this part of also a demolition job naman against the admin? But before you answer that question, let's take a short break. At the Forefront, we'll be right back. Welcome back at the forefront. Attorney Sal, si Zaldy Co in his revelations last Friday also corroborated yung mga sinabi ni Guteza sa Blue Ribbon Committee hearing na nag-deliver siya ng cash, in luggages of cash kay former Speaker Martin Romualdez at sa Malacanang din. So, ngayong mukhang yung dalawa nagtutugma yung statements. Wala naman sila. Well, si Zaldy Co mukhang wala dito sa Pilipinas and si Guteza hindi mahanap. Is this also, do you think this might point to a plot, a demolition job against the administration?
I do not think so. Yung kay Guteza, yung kanyang mga confession has been validated by Zaldy Co. Di lumakas na yung teorya ng isa. Kaya makakatulong, pero hindi ako naniniwalang may plot. Talagang nagkagulo sila kasi nga, you're hunting Zaldy Co. Survival naman yung kanya. Ang feeling niya, ba't naman ako lang? Pambihira kayo. Sama-sama tayo rito. Ginagawa niya.
With the allegations against President Bongbong Marcos by former Congressman Zaldy Co, meron ka sinabi sa statement mo last Friday that it's game over for the present political powers. And then in your column today, you said, is this the beginning of the end of the present political power holders?
Yeah.
Are you implying na magkakaroon ng withdrawal of support ng military or the police, or is this more about civilian unrest?
That depends. Kasi right now, you mentioned unrest, the rallies held last night and today and tomorrow is a manifestation, a visible manifestation of social unrest. People are outraged. People are angry. They're demanding transparency. They're demanding accountability. In fact, they're demanding regime change. Except for some na ayaw nila kay Inday Sara, pag nagkaroon ng regime change, siya magiging presidente. Pero papunta na tayo lahat doon. You know, our country never learns. The politicians never learn. Mangyayari na naman yung previous political upheavals. Ganyan na ganyan eh.
What are you referring to specifically? Marcos
People
Sr.?
Power 1, People Power 2. Yung nangyari kay Marcos Sr. and kay Estrada, ganun na nangyayari.
But when you're saying na, is this the beginning of the end of the present political power holders, are you referring to yung just people assembling together, or kailangan ba to ng support ng military? Kasi historically, nagkakaroon talaga ng difference pagka nagkaroon na ng withdrawal of the support ng military.
Yes, exactly. Yan ang mangyayari dyan. Alam mo, ang tingin ko sa military ever since, naghihintay lang yan eh. They will withdraw support kung nakita na talaga yung taong bayan ay ayaw na sa present dispensation. They will withdraw support. Ganyan ginawa nila sa panahon ni Johnny Ponce Enrile, panahon din ni Angelo Reyes. Di ba? Nung nakita nilang marami ng tao, saka sila nag-withdraw ng support. Kaya
pero at the
ko,
moment, meron ka bang personal knowledge of any discussions with military or former military?
Ako, I just analyze and prophesy. I don't destabilize. Sinasabi ko, etong mangyayari dyan, kasi yun na nga nangyari noon, hindi nga tayo natututo eh. Kaya it's happening again. Deja vu nga, di ba? Palagi ko sinasabi.
But what is the tipping point na kinakailangan? Kasi sa column mo today, nag-mention ka rin yung ng smoking gun, and you're pointing to Zaldy Co's statements if corroborated by evidence. So ano yung palagay mo magiging smoking gun?
Sinabi ko yung if corroborated, but even if not corroborated, that's a declaration of interest. Yan ang sinasabi ko.
Declaration against interest under our rules of evidence.
Merong bahid ng katotohanan ang sinasabi ni Zaldy Co. Kasi, kumbaga, hinulog niya ang sarili niya.
Pero yung pag sinasabi niya na wala akong natanggap, naniniwala ka ba doon?
Well, depende. Kasi, we must remember na bilyonaryo na yata dati ito. May pera na siyang dati. Di ba? But, pwede rin namang wala siyang kinita doon sa 100 billion.
O doon sa kickback na inabot.
You must remember na ang daming projects prior to and after. Baka naman doon siya kumita, hindi sa particular nito.
Okay. And but are you worried to some extent that itong corruption investigation na to will also lead to former President Duterte because lumalabas din naman sa investigation na this is not something that just happened under this administration. Lumaki, yun yung sinabi, lumaki under this administration. Pero it seems like the system has been there.
Hindi, alam mo, kung totoo yung sinasabi nila, di noon pa, 6 na taon siya eh. The media, mainstream media, against kay Duterte yan eh. Di sana sumabog na yan. Wala naman akong narinig na gano'n. Do you remember? Having read or heard about this flood control projects at the time
I think
of
marami
Duterte?
kasing nagbe-benefit. Kaya walang, I mean, I even worked as undersecretary ng DPWH, but then I had no clue na ganyan kagrabe yung scale. And if you're not part of the system kasi, hindi mo alam kung magkano kinikita ng mga kasama mo pala. So, nung nagkaroon ng Blue Ribbon, I was shocked also like by the scale of the corruption. So, baka naman sa sobrang dami nagbe-benefit, walang gusto mag-expose.
Sa Pilipino, ang Pilipino, wala ka may tago dyan sa loob ng departamento. Yung chismis yan, ang lakas, ang bilis. Kaya nga si Duterte, si Presidente Duterte, yung whiff of corruption lang, tinatanggal niya kagad ng cabinet member. Kasi hindi mo mapipigilan yan. There will always be smoke coming out.
But in your column today, you also talked about yung pagiging brazen na about corruption, that the politicians were displaying their wealth as well.
Flaunting.
Flaunting. Tama yun yung ginamit mong
Strutting.
word. So pag ganun, baka naman umabot na rin sa point na they think they can get away with it. Kaya yun, kahit sinasabi mo na kung sa mga departments, may chismis naman yan, lalabas. Ito nga parang open secret na eh. That's the term here in the Philippines because they're not even trying to hide
Kasi
it.
nga, that has become the way of life of politicians. They can get away with murder. Kaya, yan ang ginagawa nila ngayon.
Well, Attorney Sal, since meron ng awareness ngayon ng mga tao, and you were talking about yung people already wanting change, some groups are not calling for the resignation of President Bongbong Marcos because of a lack of alternative. Like you said, so ikaw na din nagsabi dito, meron mga may ayaw kay Vice President Sara. Do you think meron
referring
bang
to the
ibang
yellows?
option? Because some of the baggages that Vice President Sara may have would be the issue against her for the confidential funds, yung impeachment na hindi natuloy to trial. Is that an option? How do you think all of this affects Vice President Sara Duterte?
Di ba meron akong, I have a suggestion and unsolicited advice kay Presidente Marcos Jr. You have an escape valve. I said, if you are not complicit with this, kung baga naisahan ka lang because of gross negligence, mapapatawad ka ng tao. Under the Constitution, he can exercise extraordinary powers. And I disagree with lawyers that if you declare a revolutionary government, that is not within the Constitution. The Constitution says the government's primary duty is to serve and to protect. When the government created by the people is a failure, and it is failing now, then you, as president, has to do something about it. You declare a revolutionary government, people are against Congress. Gusto nga nila, barilin na yung mga yan eh. Sabi nga ng mga ibang kongresista na ako, hindi ko na masabing kongresista ako, natatakot na ako. Still, abolish Congress when you declare revolutionary government. And then jail all of them. Sabi nila, pag ginail mo naman yan, walang due process. Hindi, the due process will come after. Kasi pag ngayon ka sasabihin mong bigyan ng due process, tatakas lang, nakatakas na nga eh. And then after that, after doing the two things, you bring back Duterte para ma-stabilize. Kasi hanggang nandun siya, hindi ka matatahimik. And then number 4, na you do massive radical reforms. Patatawarin ka ng tao.
So this would be all under President Bongbong Marcos,
yes.
What you're
Kasi
describing.
kung ayaw mo pa na may succession, anyway, may 3 terms mo naman, do it. Pero pag hindi mo ginawa yan, if you declare revolutionary government just to get away from it and not doing the 4 things that I said, tuloy-tuloy pa rin yan. Tatanggal ka din.
In this whole issue, lagi rin lumalabas yung pangalan ni former Speaker Martin Romualdez. As Speaker, so he was part of the BICAM and of course also being the cousin of the President. And Zaldy Co is implicating Speaker Martin as someone who also received kickbacks. But kung bumaliktad si Speaker Martin Romualdez, then he can also corroborate Zaldy Co, assuming Zaldy Co is telling the truth. Sa palagay mo ba, will Martin Romualdez stick with President Bongbong Marcos till the end?
Sa tingin ko, survival mode lahat yan. Magtuturuan lang yung mga yan. Pero, at the end of the day, they will all be jailed. Kasi, people are revolting now. Galit sila eh. Maniwala ka. Alam mo sa isang wake ng kapatid ko, dumating si Mayor Menchie Abalos. Mayor to na Mandaluyong, ha? And she was telling us, Tito Sal, sabi niya, galit sa amin ng tao, kahit wala namang kaming kinalaman dyan, galit na galit sa amin, lahat kami. Galit sa gobyerno, kasama kami.
Just by being a politician.
Ganun kagalit. Alam mo, wherever you go, kahit saan ka pumunta sa party, ang pinag-uusapan ito, natigilan na, palitan na ang gobyerno. Parang lahat ganun eh.
Pero kung sakaling merong mga ebidensya na that will point to Speaker Martin Romualdez, pinatawag na rin siya sa ICI, pinatawag siya sa Blue Ribbon Committee, but he didn't appear there. Do you see a scenario where he might, if he is cornered, that he might also snitch on President Bongbong Marcos?
Kung gagawin niya, tapos na ang boxing. Game over. Lalong game over yan. Tilt.
Oo. But on a practical basis, meron bang possibility na mangyari yun? He'll turn on his own relative.
Bakit naman hindi? Survival mode nga eh. Di ba? Pag mamamatay ka na, manghihila ka na. Pag nasa bangi, hilahin mo na yung tumutulong sa'yo.
So, at this point in time, si Senator Amy Marcos naman, nauna siya magsabi earlier, last week na merong mga lalabas na si Zaldy Co. So, that's why meron din mga nag-speculate na this is all part of a design. Senator Amy Marcos is the sibling of President Bongbong Marcos. Pero mukhang matagal nang lumipat sa kabilang side si Senator Amy.
Balat kayo yun. Hindi ako naniniwala niya. Intrigero masyado niya si Amy.
Pero siya, wala ba siyang kinalaman dito?
Ang credibility ni Amy sa akin is zero.
Why? Why is that?
Marami akong karanasan sa kanya na hindi ka... Like for instance, yung pinagpipilitan niya na love niya si Inday, love niya mga Duterte. She was not there when the president was arrested and Inday was there at Bilyonaryo Air Base na nangangailangan ng tulong. Kung dumating ba siya doon? Wala eh. Tumahimik sila lahat. Di ba? They were all quiet. Ngayon, biglang tumatakbo sila kung saan pumunta si Inday, nandun sila lahat. Kasi nakikita nila ang lakas ni Inday ngayon. Puro mga balat. Balat kayo pala ang buhay sa mundo.
So what can we expect in the 2 more days of rallies? Meron pa today, meron pa bukas. You were there last night, no? Marami talagang tao.
I'll be there the next 3 days. But alam mo, ang problema naman kasi dito sa mga rally-rally ngayon, nung People Power 1 and 2, walang mga walang mga yellow, walang ganito, walang Marcos. Lahat sila nagkaisa eh. Kaya, they were successful. Ang problema ngayon, iba yung sa 30, iba yung ngayon. Kailangan, you put yourselves together. Unite. Kasi isa lang naman ang sinasabi nyo. Kailangan nagkakaroon ng political bias kasi yung isa ayaw kinday. Saka na kayo mag-away. Di ba? After all, kung may regime change, magkakaroon ng eleksyon after a while.
You're not talking about a succession scenario. Pag mag-resign si PBBM under our
I think
Constitution,
mag-resign siya,
si
but I don't think
Vice
he
President,
will. I don't think he will.
So you're looking at other options kung kailangan ng change.
Kasi ganun na nga mangyari. Itong 3-day rally ito, mag-accelerate ito. Lalaki ito ng lalaki. Plus yung November 30. Pag nag-combine yan, tapos na boxing. Game over.
Thank you so much, Attorney Sal Panelo. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Several investigations into the flood control scandal unravel more details and link more officials in the squandering of taxpayers' money. But the public's demand for accountability remains unanswered. Will the revelations of former lawmaker Zaldy Co adversely affect the image of the president? And will Co return to the country to formalize his allegations against the president? We will find out in the coming days. Join us again tomorrow for conversations on issues that matter. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. Always stay at the forefront.